Hi everyone, my name is Annelle Annandale and I'm an educational psychologist. In this video, I'm going to chat to you guys about some of my favorite books that I use in play therapy with younger children. And in the blog post below, I've also given you the names of the books and the authors, along with the ISBN number, in case you think that your kids might benefit from reading these stories at home as well. So my absolute favorite is this story called I Like Myself. That's by Karen Beaumont and it was illustrated by David Catrow, and he did a great job. The illustrations are just absolutely beautiful. I think quite catching. The kids usually absolutely love seeing the pictures, and that's important if you're wanting to get a message across, that the kids are engaged with the illustrations. And Karen's text is just amazing, not only in the message that it gives, but it's so well written and it rhymes, and the kids just love that because that gives them an idea of what's coming next, or it really just holds their attention. And very briefly, to give you an idea of what the book is about, it's a little girl who basically just says that she really likes herself. She likes everything about herself: her eyes, her ears, her nose, her mouth. And it then goes a little bit, the story develops where she really doesn't care what other people might say to her. So what if they don't like her? She still likes herself, and she's having too much fun to really worry about what other people might be saying behind her back. And towards the end, it even looks at aspects of when things go wrong. So she talks, for instance, about what would happen if her hair had to go all spiky and look perhaps like spines, and what if she had to get warts, and what if she had to have a snout instead of a nose. And the message is so important because throughout it keeps saying that she likes who she is. Doesn't matter if anything of those things would happen, she still likes herself for who she is. Very important to use for children who might be suffering from a little bit of a low self-esteem. An amazing message, I think, to get across to all young children, and especially our girls sometimes. So look out for this one. The Gruffalo. Who does not love the Gruffalo? So you would know that this book is by Julia Donaldson, quite a famous sort of book, and it was illustrated by Axel Scheffer. I just love everything about the book. The kids love it. They often ask me to read it over and over and over, even if they've heard it a million times. So very engaging for the kids. And it's actually probably one of the simplest ways for me to try and explain to children that even though you might not be feeling confident, sometimes acting confident will eventually become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and after a while you start feeling confident within yourself. So that's quite a difficult concept to try and get around to kids, but once they've read the story, they understand it, right? So the mouse, who was probably, going to be like a victim for any of the other animals, through his wit and through his confidence in himself, manages to outsmart all of them. And in the end, even the biggest, scariest monster, the Gruffalo, the mouse is like, you know what, I'm confident enough that I can deal with this. So great story about confidence and acting confidently. This is a story that I'll often use with children who have had some sort of trauma, usually somebody who's lost a loved one. And it's just a beautiful book. The book is called Just Like Heaven, and it's by Patrick McDonnell. It's just the most beautiful story to introduce the concept of heaven, especially with children who don't necessarily want to open up or want to talk to you about the grief that they are experiencing. It's the most gorgeous story about a little cat who falls asleep, and as he sleeps, the fog rolls in. He wakes up and then thinks he's in heaven. And two things are amazing about the story. So he then perceives everything through totally different lenses, and things that would usually be scary for him or things that would be unpleasant, he actually thinks is quite wonderful. And he meets a dog who's quite aggressive, but he knows this is heaven, or he thinks it's heaven. And all of a sudden he approaches the dog, and the dog isn't as scary, and they get along really well. So it teaches kids not only to look at things through a different lens, but I also absolutely love the idea that the author in a way introduces all these everyday aspects. the way the house looks, the dog, the neighborhood that the cat knows, and how that's just like heaven, and gives a lot of kids, the comfort to think that perhaps the loved one is in a place where things aren't too different, or where they can still sort of spiritually be available for the child, or that the child hasn't lost them entirely. Keeping them in their heart is a way to stay connected with the person that they've lost. So absolutely great book. This one I've used several times. I've actually even sent it home for some parents a few times. The story is called Sea and Sand, and it's by an author called Jonathan Lang. And Jonathan himself wrote this book when he and his wife were going through a divorce. And I found it is absolutely the best way to try and explain to a child why two people who previously possibly loved each other very much have fallen out and are not really able to go forward anymore and need to split up. And so the story is so beautiful about two turtles who fall in love, but the one is a land turtle, actually what we would call a tortoise, and the other is a sea turtle. And how even though they're turtles and they have so much in common, there are still things that are very foreign for both of them. The land turtle tries to adapt to the life of the sea turtle, but misses eating lettuce, misses being on the ground. He really struggles in the water. He can't swim. And the sea turtle, who's the female in this case, she also really tries. She tries to adapt. Then she tries to live in the territory that the land turtle lives in, but she misses her friends, and her legs just really struggle on the hard ground. They crack, and she's lonely. She really doesn't enjoy eating tomatoes. All she wants to be is be back in the sea and eat fish and eat the seaweed. And so after a long time, the two of them realize that even though they really try, neither of them are happy together, and that they are both happier on their own. What's lovely about the story is Jonathan very cleverly also works into the story that there have been children that have been born in the marriage, in the meantime. And it's beautiful the way that he basically tells a story about how both parents continue to love these kids and realize that in order to give them a more peaceful home, it's better for them to live separately. So they'll sometimes visit the mom, they'll sometimes visit the dad, and whoever they are with, they have fun, and the parents really give them their all when they're with them. So especially if you are going through a divorce, if you're not sure how to break the news to your kids, young kids, this is a fantastic book to try and use. And then so much fun is a book called Mommy Laid an Egg by Babette Cole. It is fabulous. So this story was actually linked to me by a good friend. I borrowed it from her, and I hope she doesn't see this video because I love it. I'm not sure if I'm going to be giving it back. So it's such a great story for when those big questions start coming around, where do babies come from, etc., etc. And the story basically comes about that these two kids within a family are home one day, and they start asking mom and dad, where do babies come from? Because they see that everyone's having babies, the cat and the birds outside and the dogs just had puppies. And the parents are sort of totally gobsmacked by this question. They don't know how to answer it, and they start fathoming all sorts of stuff. The babies are baked in an oven. I can't even remember some of them, that they are grown in pots, and they come up with all these fantastical ideas of where babies come from. And all along, the kids are just kind of listening to these stories, and at the end, they're like, no, that's not how it works. Let us tell you where babies come from. And I love that it actually acknowledges that children sometimes know more than we think they know. And it explains in very beautiful language, very clear illustrations, exactly where babies come from. and that it's not these elaborate stories, but it's something quite natural that everyone goes through it, you know, birds and bees and dogs and cats, and just absolutely great way to get out there, give your child the correct information, and to do it in a very fun way. So those are 5 fabulous books that I would definitely always have on my bookshelf. Maybe some books that you could look at, especially if you have young kids. I'm sure you are probably going to get to use them in the future. So thanks so much for letting me tell you about the books that I love.